G'day everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is a cool day because I've got an Aussie exclusive first ride of the new Michelin Wild Enduro tyres. The tyres I'm testing are the mixed hard on the front and the rear specific enduro tyre, and they also do a mixed soft for those softer conditions. My buddy Sean works for BikeCorp, who are the distributor of Michelin in Australia, and this is his full wheel set that I've got for just one ride. So that means this will just be initial impressions of how they ride compared to the Maxxis tyres I was on previously. If you're new to my channel, I generally just do POV riding videos, so go check out some of them. And then I also do a bit of product testing, setup testing, and bike checks. Take a look at those other videos, and if you like what you see, then consider subscribing so you don't miss out on anything in the future. So onto the tyres, and as I mentioned, they are brand new from Michelin and aimed squarely at the enduro racing market. The mixed hard is a pretty typical cut spike looking tyre, not too dissimilar to a Magic Mary, very similar to the Wild AM if you're familiar with those. It's got its center lugs in sets of 6 and then big cornering lugs on the side. The rear, on the other hand, still keeps those large side knobs for cornering traction, but down the middle it's got much faster rolling knobs and it almost presents as a semi-slick. There's less braking surface there than a DHR2, but it rolls faster as a result. Michelin's changed the graphics for this series. They're a little bit less leery. I actually quite like the blue and yellow. It's nice to have a different colored hot patch compared to usual, but you can also get a grayed out stealth option if this doesn't match your bike or your preference. The biggest change for these tires is it's a brand new casing. Previously, Michelin did a 3x60 TPI casing, which is a lot of protection, but it could result in a fairly harsh ride feel. They've given the casing a complete overhaul and it's now 2x55 TPI layers. Then there's protection from bead to bead, tread protection, and pinch flat protection. And that change to the casing is probably the thing that sets these tyres apart most from the other brands, rather than the tread. The compound is very soft. It's the Magi X compound, which is the softer compound of the two that Michelin do. It's got a very sticky feel and the knobs rebound very, very slowly. I'm not sure that I could say exactly what change that makes on the trail, but I was pretty impressed by the amount of grip on offer, at least for this first ride. Now I can't comment on how easy or hard they are to mount up because they came mounted, but I did get some measurements on them. The 2.5 inch front tyre comes out true to size at around 65 mil. That's about a mil or two narrower than my used Assegai, so potentially that Assegai is stretched a little bit, or they're just a little bit broader. And then the rear is exactly 2.4 inches, and it's identical to a DHR2. So why am I trying these out? Well, I had the opportunity to, and it's always nice to try new things, but I'm always looking for reliable performance, particularly when I race. And to me, the most appealing thing about these tyres is the rear tyre. Generally in racing, you're not doing steep, gnarly shoots, so you don't need that much braking traction, but there's always flat or pedally sections, and low rolling resistance can be a big advantage. I also don't really like running inserts, which is the reason that I run a downhill casing on the rear. And Michelin says that because of this casing technology, you'll never have to run an insert. So I only got to borrow these for a couple of days. My testing approach was just take it out to my local trails here in the Shire and give them a run. Right, first trail on the Michelins. So how did they perform? I actually found them to perform really, really well. I normally run Assegai front, DHR2 rear in max grip compound. And from the first trail, I was really able to ride these at the same pace that I ride those tyres. So far so good. Bit of slop. Right, steep shoot. Traction's very good on that, on the rock. Rear's moving around a little bit, but I think that's expected. I really like the Assegai on the front because it does have those intermediate knobs, and I was a little bit worried about the mixed hard not having those, where I've found tyres in the past to be a little bit vague as you're rolling them from the center onto the cornering lugs. I didn't really have any trouble with that, but I do think that I was trying to lean the bike over more because I was aware that I wanted those lugs to bite in a little bit better. My preference would definitely be to run the mixed soft front tyre if that was an option, just to have the safety of those lugs for when you're a bit more tired or you don't quite get that lean angle on the bike. But overall, I didn't have any sketchy moments, I didn't lose the front, and front traction was generally really good, especially when the ground was a little bit softer. Overall grip was very high, and I would put that down to the softness of the rubber. The Magi X compound feels softer than the Max Grip compound, and that slower rebounding rubber probably has something to do with it too. That extended to braking performance too, where I was pleasantly surprised. Looking at the rear, I didn't think it would have that much braking traction with those fast rolling lugs down the middle, but I found that combination of the spike tyre with the dedicated rear actually had really great braking performance, particularly when you have to jump on the brakes really hard if you're coming from a fast section into a slow section. And I put some of that down to the bite of the front tyre. But overall, braking performance was better than I expected. In cornering, I found these tyres especially predictable, particularly when you lean the bike over enough to engage those side lugs. As for rolling resistance, there's no getting around the weight of these tyres, but they are comparable to the DH tyres that I pulled off my bike. So pushing them up the hill was about the same. However, once on the trail and up to speed in those flatter sections, that faster rolling rear tyre was noticeable compared to the DH-R2, and I could generally keep the speed up a little bit more on those sort of flatter, pedally sections of trail.
I definitely roll fast.
This I think would be a great advantage if you were doing an enduro race. As I mentioned earlier, the new casing is potentially the biggest change related to these tyres and the biggest change compared to other tyres out there on the market, like the Maxxis I had been running. And that casing really dominates how the tyres feel out on the trail. I'm a fairly heavy rider and I ride fairly aggressively, and that normally means I get a rim strike pretty much every single ride. Not bad enough to do any damage, and on the downhill casings I've never flatted, but I do from time to time hear that telltale noise of the tyre bottoming out.
All right. Give Sean's wheels a test. It's pretty good. I normally smack a rim through there.
I set these tyres up with my normal pressures, 26 in the front, 28 in the rear, and I didn't get a single rim strike during the entire ride. It might be lucky, but I think it's more likely that that casing is doing its job. And if I was to continue running them, then I would reduce the pressure to generate a little bit more grip and add a bit more compliance. Speaking of compliance, and at least at the pressures I was running, that is one area where they did not perform as well as the Maxxis tyres that I normally run. They were slightly more harsh, and while that didn't affect the level of grip, I do think you can get better performance and more compliance by letting down the pressure. So being a first ride, I wasn't really expecting to talk about the durability, but I did notice that there were a few lugs that looked like they didn't get on that well with the Sydney sandstone. I imagine that's because of that super soft rubber, and whether it's something to worry about or if they'll just continue to wear at a fairly reasonable rate is something I'll have to see when I've got a set for a longer period. But I was surprised to see that rate of wear after just a few trails. The lugs down the middle seem fine, and the front seems fine, but I'd suggest if you're riding bike park or you're doing bulk shuttle laps, then you might want to investigate a tyre with a longer wearing compound. So the number one question people were asking about these tyres was how they compare to the Maxxis Assegai DH-R2 combo. And it's great to see so many people love that combo, because that's the combo that I generally run and that I compare all others to. I was able to jump on these tyres and ride them almost identically to those Maxxis, even from the first trail. So they share many of the same traits. I do think there was slightly more traction on the Michelins, and that's probably from that softer Magi X compound compared to the Max Grip Maxxis. The Michelin seemed to share similar braking performance, but I'm not sure I would want to run the rear tyre if I was riding steep chutes all the time. I'd probably be more likely to run the mix hard at the back, and as I mentioned, trying out that mix soft up front for maximum braking performance. Where the Michelins do shine is that lower rolling resistance from the rear tyre, which I think would be great in a race scenario, and this newer, more advanced casing, which looks like it offers a lot of potential. That's not to say these are better than Maxxis. I think performance overall is roughly equivalent, and I'd be happy to run either tyre going forward. I also got asked about how they compare to Continentals. I've only been able to run the Contis in the Enduro casing, which is a lighter casing and with harder rubber. I found those Contis to be pretty impressive and pretty fast rolling, while they had really great traction in dirt. On the rock, however, I found that harder compound of the Contis didn't offer up as much grip as either Maxxis Intermax Terra, let alone Max Grip, or these Magi X Michelins. So that wraps up this exclusive first ride review of the Michelin Wild Enduros. Super lucky to have had this opportunity, and I really enjoyed running these tyres, and they definitely present a great alternative to some of the more established names out there. Let me know in the comments if you tried out Michelin tyres and what you think of them, or if you've got any questions that I wasn't able to answer in this video. Thanks again for watching, leave a like before you head off, and I'll see you at the next video.